Every year, we start the college football season hearing about how Alabama's next quarterback is the Heisman frontrunner, or how Ohio State has some of the best receivers in America, or that Tennessee has the surefire Ray Guy Award winner. These things are expected from these well-established schools. But in today's video, I wanted to shed some light on what I'm calling little school giants. These were players from smaller schools that either posted significant NCAA stats or became well-established NFL players. Now, I didn't want to go too far back in time because you can find Pro Football Hall of Famers at almost every collegiate level. And I wanted to stay somewhat recent, and I think the furthest back I went was the late 90s. It's a little bit of an extended list, and it is admittedly missing some high-profile quarterbacks, but that's because those are being saved for a future video. So let's hit the intro and get to it. So after putting my thinking cap on, I decided this list is just way too long and I'm going to split it into two videos. And they're not going to be top 10s, but they're going to be a list of 10. And that's not something I normally do on my channel, but hey, life's about trying different things, right? So we're going to give you 10 athletes, 10 small school giants this video, and the next video will be 10 more small school giants, and we're going to focus more on quarterbacks in that video. Drae Archer is an example of a player personifying their team's mascot. Coming out of high school, Archer was offered scholarships from schools like Clemson and Arkansas, but those were actually track scholarships. As a result, Drae chose the one school that offered him a scholarship for football, and that was Kent State. And boy, was he a flash. He played in 11 games in his freshman season and recorded a rushing and 3 receiving touchdowns. His sophomore year saw 1 rushing and 1 receiving touchdown, but not much else of note. Before the 2011 season, Drae Archer was declared academically ineligible. And during Drae's year off, Darrell Hazell took over as head coach of the Golden Flash, and they once again posted a 5-7 record, which is what they posted the previous 2 years. But with Hazell's offense and the return of Archer, 2012 would prove to be a much different kind of season for Kent State. Drae Archer was a huge part of the success of the team that went 11-3 and won their first MAC title in 40 years. Drae rushed for over 1,400 yards, had 16 rushing TDs, 4 receiving, and returned 3 kickoffs to the house. And hell, he even threw for a touchdown just to prove that he could. Those stats helped the team to score an average of 30 points per game and put Drae Archer on draft boards around the NFL. He came back for his senior season in 2013 with another new coach, but injuries hampered his output and his statistics took a big dip. After his collegiate career, Drae Archer would be invited to the NFL Combine and he recorded a 4.26 in the 40-yard dash, which was, at the time, the second fastest time ever recorded. And this was later surpassed by John Ross's record-setting 4.22 performance. Archer was selected in the 3rd round by the Steelers. Next up, we have the sack daddy, Jalen Ferguson. Ferguson played his college ball at Louisiana Tech. And sidebar, surely I'm not the only person who calls Louisiana Tech Law Tech, right? Thumbs up, comment, simulator, whatever. Just let me know if you also prefer the Law Tech name. In his redshirt freshman season, Ferguson recorded 15 TFLs and 6 sacks. In just his second collegiate season, old sack daddy recorded 14.5 sacks and even forced 3 fumbles on top of that. He did record his lowest numbers in virtually all categories his junior year, but that just set the table for his absolutely insane senior campaign. In 13 games, Jalen Ferguson recorded 3 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, 26 tackles for loss, and 17.5 sacks. In his final game as a La Tech Bulldog, he broke the NCAA record for sacks in a career, bringing his total to 45 during his time in Ruston. In comparison, do you know how many sacks Ndamukong Suh recorded in his career? That'd be 24. Jalen earned the Sack Daddy nickname. Let's stay on the topic of sacks. Our next athlete is Rollin Jones. Now that is a name that most fans might not be aware of. But if Jalen Ferguson was the sack daddy, Rollin Jones is the sack sonny. Rollin Jones was a composite 0-star recruit out of high school and committed to Arkansas State. As a true freshman, he recorded 7.5 sacks and 30 tackles. Not bad for a young kid. His sophomore season, he upped that sack total to 8.5 and added an interception, but his game got even better. In 2016, Javon recorded an outstanding 13 sacks to go along with 56 tackles and 19.5 TFLs. The culmination of his growth was his senior year, in which he posted almost identical stats with 56 tackles,
19 tackles for loss, and another 19 sacks. While he absolutely exploded his last 2 seasons, his relatively good first 2 seasons helped bring his career sack total to 42. Some like to point to an inferior schedule for both Jalen and Javon, but Javon actually recorded 3.5 sacks in 5 games against Power 5 opponents. Sack Daddy had 5 in 8 games against Power 5 opponents. Regardless of the level of competition, these 2 guys made their marks in the history books, and I think their numbers will stay near the top for a very long time.
Quiz time. Can you name one player in the history of Miami University? That's the one in Ohio. Well, if you said Ben Roethlisberger, then you're like me, and that's the only player you can name. If you said anybody else, then I assume you're one of their hundreds of fans, or you're an absolute liar.
Big Ben was recruited by schools to play either receiver or tight end, but Coach Terry Hopner from Miami U promised to let him play quarterback, and that was good enough to get the Ohio native to commit to the Red Hawks. Hawks went 6-5 in Ben's first year on campus, but he took his red shirt and did not see any action. But it was Big Ben's team starting in 2001. Ben threw 2 touchdowns against Michigan in his first collegiate game and helped lead the team to a 7-5 record. He posted 25 touchdowns to 13 picks and threw for 3,100 yards. Not bad for a guy that people didn't want to play quarterback for him. For his encore effort, he threw for 3,200 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, again posting a 7-5 record and missing out on a bowl game yet again. But the big guy from that other Miami school was turning some heads and had some hype behind him thanks to nationwide coverage via Tuesday and Wednesday night action. Mr. Roethlisberger decided that he only wanted to spend one more year in Oxford and posted his best season yet his junior year. The 2003 Red Hawks team lost their first game to Iowa, but went 13-0 after that and won the MAC for the first time in almost 2 decades, and finally went to a bowl game, where they beat Louisville. They also had wins over Northwestern, blew out number 20 Bowling Green, and then blew them out again when they were ranked 23rd in the MAC championship game. They finished the season ranked 10th in the AP poll. As for Ben, his season looked like this: almost 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. This monster season solidified his status as one of the top QBs in a draft class that also included Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning. He also set NCAA records for most games in a season with 200 plus yards and most consecutive games in a season with 200 plus yards, which is 14, aka the entire season. As we all know, Roethlisberger went 11th overall to the Steelers and has had a stellar pro career.
Did you know that the player with the most career touchdown receptions played for Ross? Yeah, me neither. And I also wouldn't have guessed that he played in the mid-2000s. What a time for college football. So the record holder I'm speaking about is Jarrett Dillard.
As a redshirt freshman, Dillard averaged 15 yards per catch and hauled in 5 touchdowns and racked up 524 yards through the air. Not exactly setting the world on fire, but that's okay because the next year he quite literally did. As a sophomore, Jarrett Juma Porter Dillard, real name, caught 91 passes for 1,247 yards and a mind-blowing 21 touchdowns. Those 21 TDs accounted for every single score through the air for starting quarterback Chase Clement on the season. This sudden outburst of offense can actually be accredited to new head coach Todd Graham and his new OC, Major Applewhite. All other receivers combined for 8 touchdowns on the season, and those were thrown by quarterback Joel Armstrong. He was a finalist for the Blitnikoff, and ESPN named him a first-team All-American. So eyes were suddenly on the receiver at the small school named after Uncle Ben. The next year? Well, all he did was catch 14 of Clement's 29 touchdowns and accumulated over 1,000 yards once again. He was a bright spot on a team that went 3-9 in Coach David Bayless' first season. Yeah, that cool staff from last year only stuck around for 1 season. As a senior, Dillard helped the Owls to a 10-3 record and just their second bowl game in 47 years. Chase Clement went off and threw for 44 touchdowns and only 7 picks. 20 of those TDs went to our boy Jarrett. That's right, he had seasons of both 20 and 21 touchdowns. He even threw Clement one in their final game together just to cap it all off. When all was said and done, Jarrett Dillard caught 60 touchdown passes in his 4-year career in a small program in Texas. And that is 8 more than Corey Davis, who is second on the list for most career touchdowns. While injuries hampered his pro career, Dillard didn't just fade into retirement. He is actually a lawyer in Texas now, and that is almost as impressive as his NCAA record.
Quick, who's your favorite Temple player? That's right, Tyler Matakovich.
Matakovich was a composite 2-star linebacker out of New York. He fielded only 2 offers, one from Temple and one from Akron. Matakovich chose wisely with the Owls. He played his first season for Steve Adazio for the then Big East member Owls. As a true freshman, Tyler turned some heads with 101 total tackles. For his efforts, he was voted Big East Rookie of the Year and a freshman All-American. The next year saw some changes to Temple. First of all, they had a new head coach, Matt Rule, and secondly, they transitioned to the newly formed American Conference after the Big East dissolved their football associations. That year, their defensive unit improved slightly, but Matakovich's stats took a big leap. He tallied 137 total tackles, 11.5 for loss, his first sack, and his first interception. Remarkably, this season did not garner him any discernible postseason awards. In turn, Matakovich helped lead the defense from the 84th best unit in the country to the 4th ranked scoring defense in 2014. He was still able to total 117 total tackles and 10.5 for loss. Matakovich's name was becoming known on a more national stage, but perhaps his best was yet to come. Even though the defensive unit slipped to the 18th position, 2015 was a magical year for Temple, and Matakovich was the face of the program. They opened the season taking on Penn State. Not only did they play Penn State, but they actually hosted the Nittany Lions. And not only did they host Penn State on opening day, but they came away with a 27-10 victory and let the college football world know that the Owls were on the hunt. For his part, Tyler finished with 3 sacks and a pass deflection. The Owls would start the season 7-0, which would lead to a showdown with number 9 Notre Dame. They were once again hosting a big-time team and had center stage that weekend as the contest got the college game day treatment, which of course brought more attention to Matakovich, and was the featured contest of the weekend. Unfortunately, the Owls would go on to lose a hard-fought 24-20 game. Once again, Tyler Matakovich did his job in finishing with 13 total tackles, including 1 for loss and an interception. For comparison, on the other side of the ball, Jalen Smith finished with 10 total tackles, none for a loss, and no interceptions. They would go on to lose to USF, 17th ranked Houston, and then Toledo in their bowl game, but Matakovich had really become the story for the team by the end of the year. He finished his collegiate career with 493 total tackles, 40.5 for loss, and 7 interceptions, 5 of which came in his senior season. He became the all-time leading tackler for Temple, their 3rd ever consensus All-American, and also took home the Nagurski and Bednarik awards, all while being named the AAC Defensive Player of the Year. Not bad for a 2-star linebacker.
Are you coming around to using the term law tech? Good, because we got us another Bulldog.
Kenneth Dixon was a 3-star running back recruit out of Strong, Arkansas. He was courted by such powerhouses as Memphis, ULM, and Arkansas State, but he ultimately committed to Louisiana Tech solely so he could say that he went to La Tech. Okay, that part may not be factual. Now for some context, the Bulldogs had just gone 8-5 and won the WAC in 2011. They had the 43rd best scoring offense that season. Their leading rusher in 2011 barely broke 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. Enter Kenneth Dixon. As a true freshman in 2012, he led the team with 1,194 yards and 27 touchdowns. As a freshman, this helped propel the team to the highest scoring offense in the country in 2012. Dixon earned numerous awards for his first collegiate season, including Freshman All-American, WAC Freshman of the Year, First Team All-Conference, and he set the NCAA freshman records for single-season rushing touchdowns, as well as the freshman mark for total touchdowns. In an interesting non-Kenneth Dixon tidbit, even though they went 9-3 with a conference title, the Bulldogs didn't play in a bowl game that season. They were invited to the Independence Bowl, but wanted to see if any other bowls offered to have them, and when no other bowl reached out, it was too late for their backup plan because the Independence Bowl already invited Ohio in their place. Just a really crappy way for those seniors to go out. Speaking of crappy, there's no other way to describe La Tech's 2013 season. Under new coach Skip Holtz, the offense regressed to being the 112th highest scoring, that's out of 125, and Dixon ran for 917 yards and only 4 touchdowns. The team went 4-8 that year. No bowl controversy needed. But old Skippy got it under control for Kenneth's junior season. The offense shot back up to 14th, and Dixon had another incredible year. His 1,299 yards and 22 rushing touchdowns helped lead the team to a 9-5 record and a Conference USA West championship. He also added a new wrinkle to his game by catching 6 touchdown passes. And he also set the NCAA record for longest rushing play when he broke off a 99-yarder against Louisiana Lafayette. For his senior season, Dixon once again ran for more than 1,000 yards and had 19 rushing scores while adding a career-high 7 receiving touchdowns. So just to tally up his career totals, that's 4,483 rush yards with 72 rushing touchdowns and 87 total touchdowns, which was an NCAA record until another player in 2015 eclipsed that number. Check out my next video to see who that was. To say that Kenneth Dixon was must-see during his time in Ruston is an understatement. If he went to a school like Oregon, I guarantee his name would always come up when people discuss great running backs and electric players in history.
Bet you didn't know this next player came from a small school. Pop quiz. What school did Kareem Hunt attend? I'll give you a hint. He was an absolute rocket. Houston? Wrong sport. Time's up. The answer is Toledo. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Kareem Hunt was another 3-star running back prospect out of Willoughby, Ohio. His biggest offers were from Pitt and Minnesota, but he decided to stay in-state and committed to the Rockets in their 2013 class. Hunt had a solid freshman season, rushing for 866 yards and 6 scores. He had a strong 4-game stretch in the back half of that season where he rushed for 595 yards and scored all 6 of his season's touchdowns. For his sophomore effort, he had a career-high 1,631 yards and 16 TDs. He had 275 yards and 5 touchdowns alone in the GoDaddy Bowl that postseason against Arkansas State in a 63-44 win. Not a bad way to top off your season. Hunt was actually suspended for the first 2 games of his junior year. Some foreshadowing there? And when he returned in the 3rd game, he actually got injured and ended up missing the next 2. So he essentially started the season halfway through. Despite that, he racked up 973 yards and 12 TDs on the ground. In his final season on campus, Kareem Hunt added 10 more scores at 1,475 yards. Almost 5,000 yards and 44 rushing touchdowns is one heck of a career, and Hunt parlayed that small school success into a big-time NFL career where he was selected in the 3rd round of the 2017 draft by the Chiefs. He went on to be the leading rusher and make the Pro Bowl in his rookie season.
Do you know the most prolific running back in San Diego State history? Does Marshall Faulk ring a bell? Well, he's actually not the most prolific running back because he only ran for 57 touchdowns. Yeah, that's only 57. There's a guy who ran for 62. That guy is Donnel Pumphrey.
Pumphrey came out of Las Vegas, Nevada as a 3-star running back prospect. There's a pattern developing here. He fielded offers from hometown UNLV, Nevada, and Duke, but ultimately decided to offer to play for legendary coach Rocky Long at San Diego State. As a freshman, Donnel got backup reps, but did manage to put together a respectable 752 yards and 8 ground scores while hauling in 2 touchdown catches. He became the starting running back in his sophomore season. While the team's overall results slipped, Pumphrey made the most out of his opportunity and he posted 1,867 yards and a whopping 20 touchdown runs. This broke the school record for rush yards in a season, which had been held by George Jones since 1995. It was also the 3rd best performance by a running back in the country that year. He followed this up by running for 1,653 yards and 17 touchdowns with an additional 3 through the air in 2015 while helping his team to an 11-3 record. By now, the word was out on Donnel Pumphrey, and he started receiving more widespread attention from college football pundits. I remember tuning into some late-night Mountain West games just to see this guy and just being amazed by his agility and speed and his overall ability to just reach the end zone. So 2016 was seen as a year he could use to solidify not only his draft status, but also his college football legacy, and he saved the best for last. In his final campaign, Donnel Pumphrey ran for 2,133 yards and 17 more touchdowns. In his bowl game, which was also the final game of his career, he finally broke the NCAA record for career rush yards when he accumulated yard number 6,405 and surpassed Ron Dayne's long-standing record. That's right, this man ran for almost 6,500 yards and tallied 62 rushing touchdowns in 4 seasons and had a career average of 6 yards per carry. He went on to be selected in the 4th round of the NFL draft by the Eagles, and while his pro career never really took off due to injuries, his impact on the college landscape will be long-lasting. Even though his final season was just in 2016, in today's CFB landscape, it's hard to get a player with this kind of production to actually stick around for 4 seasons. So I believe his record will be safe for a while. And I also think the best chance at breaking that record lies with another exceptional athlete that grinds out 4 years at another overlooked school like San Diego State is.
And lastly, the player that sparked the idea for this whole video. I think if I just show you one image, you'll know who it is. That's right, Brian Urlacher, baby.
Brian Urlacher is the epitome of talent meeting hard work to produce success. Merchandising coming on that. Urlacher grew up in Lovington, New Mexico, and was actually an all-around athlete in high school. He played multiple positions across all 3 phases of the game, and he led his team to an undefeated state championship season in his senior year. That year, he recorded 12 touchdown catches, 6 return touchdowns, and 2 more on the ground. Now, I couldn't find any information on his recruitment since this was back in the 90s, but I would say considering the small school he came from, he probably would have been graded around a 2-star coming out of high school. Now, it's reported that young Brian wanted to play for Texas Tech, but they didn't offer him a scholarship. So, like a lot of the other players on this list, he stayed home and attended the University of New Mexico. While at Albuquerque, he had an all-star cast of coaches, and that began with head coach Dennis Francione. Okay, maybe he's not one of the all-stars. Francione did change Urlacher to a linebacker. Also look out for Brian linebacker shirts incoming. But he kept him sidelined in favor of more experienced players. He saw little playing time in his second season, but a silver lining was on its way. That silver lining? The Lobos were having successful seasons, and that led to Francione leaving for TCU after the 97 season. That allowed Rocky Long to become the head coach, and he was enamored with Urlacher, and he even created the Lobo back position for him in his 3-3-5 defense. Now, this position was a hybrid linebacker free safety position, and Urlacher had help from defensive coordinator Bronco Mendenhall. These 2 coaches I do consider all-stars. His impact was felt immediately, and he led the nation with 187 tackles his first season as a starter. While season-to-season breakdowns are hard to find for a smaller school in such a time as the late 90s, we do know that he finished his career with 442 total tackles, 3 picks, 11 sacks, and 11 forced fumbles. Rocky Long apparently watched some high school film of the linebacker because he had him contribute on offense as well, where Brian caught 6 touchdown passes in his career. Oh, and he also returned 5 kicks to the house in his career. After his senior season in 1999, he was voted an All-American, was a finalist for the Jim Thorpe Award, the award for the best defensive back in college football, and even got enough votes to finish 12th in Heisman voting. All of this with just 2 years as a contributing starter on a lowly New Mexico team. The Pro Scouts took notice of this, and the Bears drafted him 9th overall. I'm willing to bet everything I'll ever have to say that this is the highest pick New Mexico will ever have in the NFL draft. All he did with that was become one of the best known players in football, sell a record amount of jerseys, become a video game cover athlete, and be inducted into both the college and pro football halls of fame. While he's not the first pro football Hall of Famer to come from a small school, he is by far the most famous New Mexico Lobo, and he's personally one of my favorite stories in college football history.
So there are 10 small school giants who made big impacts either on their school or on the greater college football landscape. Like I said before, the next video will focus on 10 small school quarterbacks who lit up the CFB world. Don't really have a closing, so see you later.